ahead and get our meeting started. We may have one board member just slip in real inconspicuously, kind of now. So it's 5:31, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. If you will join me in flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Miss Yummy, I'm gonna do a roll call. We do have three of us, okay? And so, we do have a quorum, so if Eric slows in, we'll go from there. Okay, Dr. Hoffman, turn it over to you.
Yeah, let's get it started off with some amazing news. So since we were together in Brothers, we've actually won two pretty important awards. So we're gonna start off, I'm gonna invite Mr. Bonner, Mr. Huffman, and they brought some student athletes. So we're gonna have them come up and talk about the 4A OACA All Sports Award, the first time the high schools won it since 1982. So Rob, Jake, why don't you guys come up and tell us about this award? And you brought some students as well.
So we just talk up there.
Yeah.
We'll be right here. Is this all right? Unfurl your banners, please. So, as Dr. Hoff said, first time since 82. So we won an all sports award in 1980, 81. Yeah. And 81, 82. So that was an OSAA All Sports Award. Now this one's an OACA All Sports Award, Oregon Athletic Coaches Association Award. These awards you see for OSAA, they take into account grades, state placings, all kinds of things. The OACA award is strictly for state placings. So you're awarded points if you place first through eighth at the state tournament, and they take into account last spring's sports. This fall and this winter. And so I was at Sun River at our conference, and Rob Younger, the OACA president, came up and congratulated us and said that we had won the OACA All Sports. So again, that's all sports, spring, fall, and winter, that placed first through eighth, and we've had a slew of them from boys track state champs, wrestling state champs, girls wrestling fourth, tennis golf placed third or second, girls golf, and there's of course a slew of them that I didn't write down, but pretty amazing. Yeah, volleyballs, third, basketball fourth, and on. So yeah, this year's OACA All Sports Award. So we're going to make a banner as close to this as we can because we love the age of that and they're just classy. So we're gonna make a 2024-25 OACA All Sports and hopefully coming July, maybe we'll hang another one that says OSAA All Sports. So
Just tell them my idea. This isn't sold yet, but I thought
it's gonna float this.
I think this would be really cool.
It's floating. It's perfect.
So when we make it official and we have the new banner, one of the things we're thinking of is inviting any Crook County athlete that was competing in 1981, 82 to come and present the new banner to you. So
And all of a sudden it's no longer floating.
yeah. So that's not an official idea yet, but that's something that we're looking to do later in May to bring in the community, kind of reflect on that past glory and also tie it to some of our awesome student athletes in the world, the work we're doing. So
can we start with you, Victor? Can you tell who you are, what sports you play?
Victor Rodriguez, I play soccer and tennis.
I'm Callie Weinberger and I do volleyball.
I'm Gary Stefanik and I do football, basketball, and tennis.
So we invited these three individuals because of the multi-sport nature and what they do for our school.
I don't play sports or.
Yeah,
it's fine.
These kids. Anyway, if you put the board, you have any questions for our athletes?
Awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm super impressed. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
That's
I can't wait to see the new banner.
I can't either.
excellence at all levels.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and academically, if these guys told you about the grades and all that, that's why we're doing really well at the OSAA level as well. And we had 7 sports this spring in the academic top 10. And that's it just keeps coming. And I haven't broke that out yet, so that's just a sneak peek, but very good.
It's just floating.
It's just floating.
it's an idea we're thinking.
Yeah,
Those were coming in the gym
they were
years ago.
taken down before my tenure here. And then I kept them, in my locker in my room because they're awesome, and then we're gonna put them back up. Yeah, they need to get back up.
We'll get them back up there and we'll bring in the 80 through 82 athletes.
I'm just floating in.
Yeah, just floating.
Floating ship is.
The throwback design.
In the schools, we can-
Throw back to sign.
Yeah.
Well, not as cool, but we made you a flag.
Yeah. Didn't get you in. Alright.
Appreciate all you're doing, and tomorrow, let's give them another round of applause. Yeah, let's get a quick picture. Oh, quiet.
The back end is open.
In the middle there, Rob, right there.
Get in the middle, I'll stand by you.
They tend to-
1, 2, 3.
All right, thank you all very much.
And one thing I particularly love about our districts is it's not just sports, and we get to celebrate other accomplishments outside the classroom. So now I'm gonna bring up Mr. Matt Fisher, and he brought some of his mathletes, which is kind of the coolest name I think we could hear. So Mr. Fisher and the mathletes, why don't you come up, and he's gonna tell us about our 7th and 8th graders just won a competition.
Yeah,
They took it.
yeah, that was me, yeah, okay, so, my name's Matt, thank you for having us, and, so, thanks for letting me be here, and, this is part of our team, we have 9 people on our team, and not everybody could be here tonight. But what it is, it's called Pentagame, and we've been doing Pentagames in Firth County for, I think, about 25 years. We're the only Central Oregon middle school that does it though, so we usually travel to Eastern Oregon or Western Oregon, or we always go to Eastern Oregon. This year we went to Western Oregon. This was in the 25 years, I think this was the 3rd time we won it, so it's very exciting. It doesn't happen all the time, and these guys did it, they made it happen. Anyway, it's only for 7th and 8th graders. We went up against 8 other schools, so there's 9 schools altogether. And there's 27 7th graders, 27 pre-algebra students, and 27 algebra students. And then they take all their scores. The 7th graders go against the 7th graders, the pre-algebra goes against the pre-algebra, and the algebra goes against the algebra. And then they take all their scores and they add them up together and they place. And so it was very, very exciting. Our team overall took 1st place. And so I'm going to introduce you to a couple of our teammates here. This is Rachel. She's on the 7th grade team, and Blake was on the 7th grade team. And so this is their 1st year, and so I'm excited for next year because hopefully they'll go back if they want to, and it'll be fun to have them. And then this is Emma and Capri, and Emma and Capri are on our algebra team. And our algebra team overall took 1st place as a team, and Capri was 5th place, and Emma took 2nd place. And as individuals, so out of the 27 in their division. And Emma just stepped in at the last minute. She was great. So she was like, sure, I'll go. And she did great. And Capri did this last year with us, and they're just such great leaders, and we're gonna miss them so much. They're a fun group. They are a very kind group, very good sports, and just very, very, very proud of them, very thankful for them. And they did a great job. We had 5 other members who couldn't be here tonight, but they were awesome. We had 5 individuals placed in the top 5, and so that's pretty. I don't know that we've ever had that many. So just a great team, and they came together, and it was a bigger competition than we've ever been to, and they did it. So a special group, and one that I'll always remember. And Mrs. Whiting too, very good, a big part of that. And so, yeah, so great time, great, we get to go over, since we stay at the school the night before, because we're the only one coming. They all say, oh, you guys came from such a long way. And so they think that's a pretty cool deal. And so we go over the night before and play and have fun, and it's just a great time. So very proud of them. Yeah, so.
Hey, Matt, Mr. Fisher probably knows this, but it's probably about 6 years ago, the school board decided we wanted to invest heavy in math and improve our math instruction. And it's so cool to fast forward, 5, 6 years and say, hey, now we're bringing back titles from all over Oregon. So such a credit to our teachers and our students and our parents for working with these kids and doing amazing things.
All I have to say is that Mr. Fisher, whoever gets coached by you seems to really thrive, and so I just see goodness coming out that, and as a parent, I'm just so grateful
Thank
for your work and.
No, it's just competition regardless of what it is. I mean, stepping up under the pressure and being able to function.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, they did, and I was like, I'm in one of the games, like I run one of the games and it was kind of cool. It's like, it was the algebra team, it was the last game of the day and they were in fourth place going into the final question and they needed to get it right, they needed to get it fast and they did, they vaulted, it was like a 3-pointer at the buzzer, it was so cool. They
Get the
got
clutch.
first place, yeah, it was clutch, yeah, it was exciting, they
Still
stole.
clutch at home. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, really a great group and always will be
Can
sure.
we hear real quickly from each kid, their favorite class and what you want to be when you grow up?
The very man.
I was gonna say.
Do you want to start?
Sure. My favorite class is either math or science, as I'm a teacher. And I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up, but probably marine biologist.
Awesome. Yes.
My name is Maria. My favorite class is social studies and I want to be a labor editor. My name's Emma and I either want to be a cop or go into the medical field.
My name's Blake and my favorite class is either math or science and I wanna build drones or fly drones.
Pretty cool group, so I think it's picture time, guys.
Pretty big check on that.
Yeah, let's get a picture. Okay, sure. All right, 1, 2, 3. Hey, let's give him another round of.
What would just do these? These are fun. Wrap it up. Have fun. Yeah, right? Okay.
Yeah, I know
I'm just gonna wait for 1 second, Joel.
Yeah, we'll set.
You don't wanna hear. No. If nobody wants to hear. It's scary.
Thanks, Carrie, for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you so.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for your time.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
congratulations. Okay, well, that was fun. Okay, gonna move on to policy updates. Here we go. 3.1, Mr. Weeks, you're up.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. We've got a few policies here, actually, for the HR world to bring you tonight. First, we're gonna make it easy to start, though. The first 3 in particular. So on February 24th, the board approved 3 policies. They approved JHFF, JHFE, JHFEAR. Whenever you see a policy that starts with a J, it's because it's a student-focused policy. When you see a policy that starts with a G, it's a staff-focused policy. When they're slashed, like they are here, they're essentially the same policy, just one is led with staff and one is led with students. So what we bring you on the first 3 tonight for the GBNAA, GBNAB, and GBNABAR is the staff version. The wording of these are identical to what the board approved in February of 24th, now just applying to the staff instead of the students. So that's what you see on your first 3 here tonight.
And that was February 24th.
February 24th.
Move up on the student side.
Yes, we did the J side of them, which were the student sides.
Does that mean the J is in the front and this is on the back end?
Correct.
So did you should take that well.
So yep, that slash basically just means it's the same policy. We're just saying this one's the student and this one's in the staff.
I just, a housekeeping thing on the first page, the bottom on subsection 4. Just looking at clarification, it says student conduct may only be sexual conduct if the student is also an employee.
That's because,
Does that meant to say student conduct?
yeah, and the reason why that's meant is because if a student is actually employed with us doing some, like maybe it's we've utilized some students in the summer in like the summer blast program or otherwise, they're also a staff member. At that time, they're also an employee, but they're still the student and the student conduct during that. So the purpose of that student conduct may only be sexual conduct if the student is also an employee. It's basically just calling out the fact that if they're employed,
Gotcha.
that basically this policy kicks in.
you guys see any reason why we couldn't just approve all three?
There is a technicality here as this is a first reading. This goes deep into the board rules, so it's a first reading. To have it be anonymous, you need to have all 5 board members. But what you can do tonight on all first readings is you can vote 3 to move it to the second reading.
Yep.
And then we'll just indicate that so the board knows that you guys already moved it forward.
I thought I had housekeeping and I was like, I had to reread it again.
Yeah.
Important. Did you guys have anything else on this? No, I didn't.
I didn't.
You doing that? Make sure.
Go ahead.
No, oh, I don't have anything.
No, you're gonna make a motion, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. I move that we move these forward. Is that
We have 3, right?
three? All three policies forward
To the second reading.
to the
As a-
second reading.
Approve the first reading. That
So,
motion, not the reading.
thank you. Thank you. So we have a motion on the table to take the first 3, GBNAA, GBNAB, GBNABAR, and send it to the second reading, and we have a second on the table. We
Still don't have 5.
have further discussion.
No.
Do we want to pause?
I think because these will just vote to get to second reading. Just draw it, we'll have a good run in the next meeting, unless you guys want to go through all that again. Do you have a preference?
I do not.
Okay. So, we will go ahead and do a roll call vote. So Kelsey
Yes.
and Steve
Yes.
and Chair, yes. So those are both yes. So Eric, just so you're aware, the first 3.1, 2, and 3, we just had a housekeeping part on that between the 3 of us. And then all we did was just move it to a second read. Because we do not have all 5 board members,
Okay,
just so you're aware.
second read, got it.
So then we're going to go to 3.4, which is GCBDA.
Yep.
We're just gonna let him catch up.
You bet.
Apologies for being late there.
Life happens.
You missed our exciting student awards.
Yeah.
Ooh, which ones were they?
We got the 4A Oregon Coaches Award for our high school, first time we've won it since 1982. And our Penta Games 7th and 8th graders won the Western competition, so,
The athletes?
yeah. athletes.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm gonna live with some 82 wrong.
All right, everyone's caught up to speed.
All right. The next ones we have, we'll go through each one individually, but no, they all actually pertain to like staff leave in some way, whether it's the FMLA, OFLA, the PFMLI, or the Oregon medical or military leave as well. So they all pertain to that. They all come out of Senate Bill 1515. So these are all legislative driven changes that OSBA has recommended.
Just for the record, can you just go through one time and spell out all the acronyms that you did roll through?
You betcha. So yeah.
I mean, I'm just.
Mhm.
watching everybody.
Yeah, I had to really
Yeah.
break it down for my brain to
Yeah,
keep
because there's a
it
lot.
all straight.
There are, and Oregon has more than several other states as well. Everybody has the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. Then Oregon also has the Oregon Family Leave Act. We also have the new Paid Family Medical Leave Act. Then there's also the military one in here, which is the Oregon Military Family Leave Act. So they're all different ways that an employee can use leave. They all have different rules that govern them, from how you access them to how long you have to be employed, to how many hours you have to work. All of those have different requirements. Most of them run concurrent, except in a few cases. OFLA, the Oregon Family Leave Act, used to be a much more used before the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, or PLO, Paid Leave Oregon is another acronym you'll hear for that. When that came out just about a year and a half ago, that really took a lot of what OFLA had and made it into PLO. So then they came back and changed OFLA greatly, because OFLA, the Oregon Family Leave Act, you used to have anything from maternity, paternity, all sorts of different components that were eligible under it. When paid leave Oregon got approved by the legislature, a lot of what's in the paid leave Oregon was the same as the Oregon Family Leave Act. So what they did is they said, well, we don't need all of those anymore. So then they pared back OFLA to the main pieces of OFLA is there's a sick child. So if you've got a sick kid, OFLA will pertain in there as a big one, as well as bereavement. So if someone close to you passes away, bereavement still sits within OFLA too, because those were not governed under the new paid leave Oregon. So it's just a matter of where and what we call a qualifying event and where that would go. Paid leave Oregon is a much broader way to be able to access leave. It's basically $1,000. If you've made $1,000 with any employee or any company with $1,000, you become eligible for that. It's based on your last 5 quarters of pay. So 5 quarters, go back just over a year for that. Average comes out, that's the payment that comes forward from paid leave Oregon. It's the only one that's truly fully paid. For an employee to use the other, if they want to be paid, they have to use their leave, sick time, vacation time, personal time, and otherwise to be paid under the others. And those all have different rules. So all of these spelled out in policy for some of them too. It's not our rules that govern how to get to FMLA. It's the actual law that says that. And it talks about 1,250 hours in there over a year. That's not us that sits that bar of an hour, or excuse me, a year and 1,250 hours. That's the law that governs that. Oregon Family Leave Act has a difference. It's a 6-month or average of 25 or 20 hours a week, excuse me. That's governed by law too. That's not us setting that time frame. We're just taking the law and putting it within the policy. So,
So
does that help kind of break it down?
yeah.
Okay.
So Jay, my understanding in reading this is there's nothing here that was just like somebody's opinion or subjective. This is only mirroring what legislative.
That's what I was
Yes.
getting, like, I don't see much here for an opinion to be put in here.
It's just like, are we gonna?
Yeah,
Yes.
not much to discuss other than just updating all, making it
Right.
equal to what the standards need.
Yeah, and when OSBA puts things out, sometimes they'll have a bracket of, hey, choose this or that.
Yeah.
You know, there's one bracket in there that we chose because our collective bargaining agreements force us to choose a bracket. For instance, one of those is remember I mentioned that employees get paid under the paid leave Oregon. There's an average median that it'll pay out. If you make over that threshold, it doesn't pay more than the threshold. So you then, if you want to stay at the same salary to be out on leave, you have to supplement that with your sick time, vacation time, personal time, whatever that is. And our contracts with our collective bargaining agreements with both our classified and our certified state that they can use their sick time to supplement to make their salary whole. So in the policy that in the law, there's an option to do that. As an employer, we opted into that with our collective bargaining agreements. So Steve, you're right. There's not much in there that's really a change for it, but there were 1 or 2 pieces like that collective bargaining also drives that.
This is a good opportunity to recognize the amazing work that our HR department does. Jay and Ms. Simmons and Nikki Gorski helps out as well to keep all of this straight for 450 employees and various leaves. We're so grateful for our HR department.
And to know the difference between all of that.
And Tina really knows it so well. She is so good with the staff, follows up with staff all the time as they're out, even just to see how they're doing when they're out on any type of medical leave. She really goes above and beyond for the staff. So kudos to Tina, as you mentioned in there too. She really knows it well.
So they're wanting to delete this one, put this in its place,
Correct.
just because it was a complete,
Because of paid leave Oregon really overhauling,
right, okay.
it was easier for OSBA to basically say, get rid of it, let's start over. Otherwise, you would have seen so much blue and red in there.
Right.
It would have been much harder to follow.
I started to reference back and forth between them,
Mhm.
to be like, oh, what's missing and what's added? And then I realized the next one
Mhm.
had stuff that is already in there. So I'm just gonna ask you.
Yeah.
So, cause I went across.
Mhm.
Is
It's a
there
lot.
any- Is there anything of significance that has been taken out? Or is there anything of significance that's been put in, besides what you just said about the plastic bag?
It's really all law Senate Bill 1515 driven on all the changes. And just to make sure that we were compliant also with collective bargaining agreements. With instances, like I mentioned earlier, with whether or not a individual or an employee can use their leave to make their salary whole while out. And these are similar to what we talked about before. We cannot actually make these policies truly adopted tonight. As we're looking at them, these are first readings because we don't have all 5 board members.
Well, it's good to know that that just narrows it all because of obviously bill limits.
But the AR has the same number, correct? I mean, it's just, you're deleting the old version.
Yes. Yeah, and the new one is, I think it's 15 pages, if I remember right. In here, the new one that's coming in, and it is all blue writing.
Yeah.
And that's the one that comes in, and that one it's exactly what you just, it's just cleaning up the new law with the Senate Bill 1515.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt GCBDA and GCBDA AR, delete the old one and adopt the new.
Second. Does, are we just going forward to a second meeting? Is that what we're doing?
To a second reading.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the table to move GCBDA and GCBDA to a second reading, and we have a second on the motion. We have further discussion. Okay, we're gonna do roll call vote. Kelsey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And yes as well. So that moves us.
I have to say, these notes are amazing and make it.
Yeah,
like,
Yes.
those are so helpful.
Oh, good. That's my hope is it.
Cheat sheet there.
Like,
Slip
you know,
down.
cheat.
It's huge.
Yep.
It's such a good record of what's been done.
Good.
Yeah.
You gotta be able to take that and then go back and put it, read that while you're reading the
Exactly.
policy. I think it's huge.
So the next 2 that we have in here, the last 2 that I have for you tonight, the GCBDC and the GCBDCAR, both have to do with Senate Bill 1515 again. And where this comes back to, when we were defining those paid leaves earlier, the PLO or PFMLI is how you'll notice it within the notes in here, added in the safe leave. So safe leave being what you'll see at the top of the policy proposed here of GCBDC, where you'll see safe leave now in brackets at the end. PLO now governs, or PFMLI, you'll hear both acronyms again. That actually gives that leave if this type of occurrence was to happen. So in order to come into compliance with that new law of safe leave, PLO, that's where OSBA has recommended these changes come into place. Biggest thing is you'll notice it's coming into law. They did some little things too, like move the definitions further back in the policy. Instead of starting with the definitions, they moved them back. So they're just sitting further. But the policy itself is just adjusting. There's some grammar pieces they put in. No substantial changes other than what the law requires.
What's the bias? The added bias.
So I believe the bias is the same piece, and I'll double check that before the second reading. But the bias is a new word they put in, but I do believe that's part of the same bill, but I'll double check that for you.
It just, bias seems so subjective.
Oh, here, there's a definition, victim of bias on 3.6, definition 1 or 2. Oh, bias premise defined, that doesn't look on this.
You'd have to reference the ORS.
Mhm.
We can dig in that,
Yeah.
get that back to you by second reading.
It just, it's a very subjective
Yeah.
word. That depends on who's defining it.
What the bias is, yeah.
That's my big question there is what do they mean by that? And who's gonna define it?
We'll get a definitive answer for you. I do notice when I'm looking in here, there was no definition of bias previously in the definitions they struck. But they do have the definition of number 2 in that blue. Now,
Just something you.
on 3.6, I'm looking on second page there, the blue definitions, that victim of bias was not in their original definitions.
Victim of bias means an individual who's been a victim of bias. That's very.
A little bit of a circle there for you.
Yeah, well, but it does,
Do have
I was
definitions.
gonna say, it
It does
does,
have-
yeah. And what we can do is get that ORS printed for you, so you know what those are moving forward.
But still, it was added in because it is an 15.
Yes.
But it would be good to know.
Okay.
Okay.
Eric, did you have anything for Jay on this one?
I didn't want.
It was in the on these two. No, for Jay. Negative. Okay. And just the bias being defined on.
Looks like you're biased for you.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Bias incident means a person's hostile expression of animus toward another person relating to the other person's perceived race, color, religion, gender identity. All those fun things.
Kind of fits the non-discrimination.
Yep.
Language.
Would that be?
We could probably review it when we have time to. It's a really long for us.
We can get that, to you guys, on second reading. Okay. Need a motion on that to move those to second reading?
Do you need that or you need a?
Depends on the board's comfort to that. If you're comfortable moving forward to a second reading and having the ORS for you in between, we can do that. Or if you want to wait to push it to second, we can do that too. It's really the board's choice if they want to push forward.
I'd like to wait, so.
I think I should sit on that one.
Yeah. We could like to bring it back for another first reading.
Hold it at the more expanded definition of the bias thing,
Yeah,
or cliff notes of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion, I'm not looking for.
I'm okay with that.
Or I think the four agreed right there with you, so.
Thank you. Yeah.
Was that all for you?
That was it.
Well, look at you.
I know.
Hey, thank you, sir.
Well, I felt kind of easy to bring back.
He's like, that's
He's like,
it.
I got it. Oh,
He has to go find us an ORS of some sort.
We'll get it.
Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Okay, Miss Carrie, the table is yours. And the whole table for
Yeah.
you to,
Spread out.
well, I know. Trying to get a few things done.
But Jay was real fast.
It'll work.
Okay. I'm back with IIA, AR, and IKF. So last time I was in front of you with IIA, we briefly looked at IIA. And noted that we were waiting on the community school boards to give us a final draft of their recommended policy. You have a rough draft of what community school boards has recommended on your tables somewhere.
Yet.
Okay,
Don't make me fit out.
yeah. Well, it was in March's, are we in April? Yeah, it was in March's, the rough draft. But Tammy went ahead and said she would make copies. So,
Refresher.
yeah, so community school boards gave that to us in March as a rough draft of policy IIA, but in the email, if you read the email that they sent really quick, they suggested that they might have more revisions coming. And so at the end of March or at our last policy session, we mostly agreed to just kind of wait on IIA until those revisions came through and look at IIAR. So I can do anything. I'll give you a minute to read through that. How's that?
So Carrie, is there? what I'm getting is that there probably still is gonna be changes coming.
The community school board is still planning on bringing about recommended changes.
Like, well,
OSBA is not planning on bringing about any more recommended changes that I'm aware of.
like, what's your recommendation, like, from your perspective?
Looking at, well, are you asking kind of like looking at the community school boards, what they're looking at, or just in terms of like, do we wait and see what
Yeah,
they're?
Both, I'd love to hear.
I think that community school boards, instruction has been a tricky, or instructional materials have been a tricky kind of piece over the last couple of years. And looking for what are good materials, what are materials that contain bias, what are materials that don't contain bias, what are materials and at what grade level people consider those materials available. So I think what community school board is doing is they're really trying to get down into the very specifics of when we talk about quality materials, what in their opinion makes a quality material or a lack of quality material. They have done similar things in terms of identifying and defining the difference between core materials, supplemental materials, library materials, and classroom materials. So that looks really similar to what OSBA has done. They have kept in much of the language about, like in the second paragraph, that says respect for all humans regardless of race, color, creed, national origin. But the first couple of lines of that second paragraph there emphasize instruction in honesty, morality, courtesy, obedience to law, respect for the national flag. You don't see that in the OSBA policy. And so that is a board preference, whether you want to really define very specifically what quality instructional materials do and what their purpose is. And as you go on, it also defines more specifically what quality instructional materials are not or do not contain. Is that a nice way to put that, Joel?
I'll weigh into this
Okay.
a little bit. So instructional materials is can be a very controversial issue. We've seen that. I think the answer is to incorporate some language from both. Charlie, we talked a couple months ago about as we review this policy, making sure that we hit those community standards and are defining the community standards. There's a piece in this that I really like from the community school boards, that selection criteria, those bullet points. I think those are spot on and something we should really look at. They go later in their recommendation draft policy, they go very specific, which I feel is maybe a little interesting. But in terms of they're just bullet points, I think those are good. I think it's important, as we've seen maybe more so in the valley, of some questionable resources. I like that they have this bullet point, excludes materials containing any pornographic material or images, sexual explicit content, lewd or obscene language, graphic violence, or content encouraging sexual behavior. I want to be able to tell parents that we do not have that in our curriculum. Going down, they get even very more specific, which I want you guys to read, but I think there's some language from the community school boards that would really fit with what our community, from what I hear, would want in their materials. So I think potentially keeping this in the queue for the board. And then as community school boards finalizes, we could bring a draft combining OSBA and community school boards. But I think there's good language in both, that because curriculum has been such a hot topic in a number of areas, we want to really make sure that we've clearly identified our community. Here's how we're choosing curriculum.
Yes, I agree. I think, again, us defining our community standards, that way we don't have to rely on somebody else's.
Exactly. I think particularly, we are not Portland, we are not Salem, and our parents, our stakeholders, I think they really would be interested in making sure that we are putting clear language in on, here's the kind of materials that we're allowing in the classroom.
And here's how we find those.
Yeah.
So I also like the selection criteria that, it's recent. We're not adopting things from 2004. We are
I also like that promotes viewpoint diversity and balance on political. We've got a controversial topic policies where we want to be able to present both sides of issues and give students the critical thinking skills to look at the evidence and choose for themselves. So I think I really wanted to get this one in front of you guys again, just to make sure that you're kind of seeing the options out there, and then maybe next round we could bring a proposed one that combines some of the language and you guys could read both and say, hey, I really want to make sure this part is in this and whatnot. But I don't want to brush over this one because I think it's really important to the community.
It's a good firewall.
Yeah, for sure.
I think too, it'd be worth it to put this out to the community and have the comments on it because.
Yeah, we can get a proposed kind of combination draft to bring to the board and get that out on the website to get feedback as well.
I like the selection criteria bullet points. My only concern is when we put stuff out there that is qualitative instead of quantitative. So like, whose idea is it that this is explicit content or this is graphic violence? Just going back in recent history with like some books that have been pulled, Hatchet was one of them, for graphic violence and some suggested, because the kid was getting divorced or saw his mom kissing somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, to me, objectively, it's a great book for a kid.
Yeah.
But that's my judgment as a parent. I don't want to make that judgment for someone else's kid. But at the same time, I don't want to restrict potentially good literature with too constraining language for selection criteria where it can be challenged too easily. I would want some kind of review. And I do want the community standards reflected, but I also don't want it to be too restrictive to where we aren't trying to broaden our children's minds, I
Challenge
guess.
the mind.
Right.
And I think that's why it was so important. I'm glad you made that point where we really want to keep this in front of you so that you're seeing all the options and finding something that we believe as the elected officials of the community that will fit the community, but also not be so restrictive that there's no materials available. So we're really kind of trying to find that sweet spot of what that is. So this would be one that I'd continue to look at, and then as you see it pop up again, this is one that I don't think we should take lightly, and I really want to be fully informed and be thinking through this.
Well, and I think too, it makes sense to think about it in, I forget what policy it is, but with the curriculum review process. Because then if we have a mechanism, to have that conversation, Eric, in a way that's productive and fruitful, because there is gonna be some books, I think Hatchet's a perfect example where the majority of parents, I would assume, I wanna reject that, are gonna say, yes, I want them to read this book, but there's probably gonna be some that opt out, but that doesn't mean we have to opt out for all kids, right? And we have to be able to have those checks and balances in a healthy way.
Again, if you know it's a sensitive topic, put it out in the open and address it and talk about it and don't just slam the door on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for my thoughts, we don't need to move quickly on this. We currently have an IIA. It needs some revision. OSBA says it needs some revision to include some language about the public meetings law. And again, the ORS about US history and what we have in US history, making sure that both sides are supported and seen, or all sides. That one doesn't take place until 2026. So we've got time in terms of that. And also we know that any meetings that we have that are in reconsideration committee, we will already follow public meetings law. So it is not as though if we have a reconsideration committee come forth, we have the option of not, having that happen according to public meetings law, if that should apply. Yeah. So I'm okay holding off. I'm okay doing some work when we get the community school boards kind of final draft of doing a bring together and then getting you guys to have some weigh in on that. Okay. Maybe that one been said. Okay, but then IIAR, we did spend quite a bit of time on last time. And so the copy that is in front of you, the new pieces that I took from our conversation last time that were added are now in gray highlight. No, wait, hold on. I was looking at IKF. Hold on. No, this is not gray highlight yet. We're still at yellow highlight. Sorry, I had IKF in front of me and I was like, that's like a sixth reading. So we're looking at gonna be yellow highlights. Yeah. And these were based on some of the feedback that you guys gave last time. Page 215 of this one. You agreed last time to take out the part that said complaints alleging material constitutes protected class discrimination, should be submitted through the district's discrimination complaint policy and procedure. You guys asked to take that out, thinking like, nope, it still needs to come back into this procedure. A couple just. Oh, the classroom teacher receiving a written concern, we talked about like, no, but classroom teacher doesn't have to, you don't have to write down your concern. If this is the first, like, hey, I wonder, for example, what you're reading, I kind of have some concerns about Hatchet, that a person shouldn't have to say, like, let me write this out in an email, or let me formally give you a letter. Let's just have a face-to-face conversation. So you asked to take that out of written. And then I had a request to kind of go like first step, second step, third step. And so to make those paragraphs, so they were more like, what happens first? Oh, we're still having a concern. What happens second? Oh, that concern wasn't addressed well enough. What happens third? So that is why those are highlighted in the yellow. Can look through that language. I'm at the bottom of 215 and at the top of 315.
And as you're reading through it, this is, I think, third or fourth reading, so this could be adopted tonight.
On the top of page 315, we do have a double WHO, WHO, so we'll cross out one of those.
Yeah, double.
We have a who.
Ooh.
We'll get rid of one of the who's. And then let me know when you guys are ready for me to kind of move through the next page.
When you say next page, you mean the request one.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so on 515, the request for using supplementary curriculum, and this was in here, just that one change that's highlighted in yellow, or inappropriate, just at the NES piece, so that's a change from last time. Moving on to 715. Through conversation, you guys requested really, like, if you're gonna, and this is the reconsideration request form, so if you're gonna ask for this to be reconsidered for all students in the district, you really need to, on 2B, be specific about page numbers, timestamps, and materials that is objectionable. You asked for that to be its own section instead of just in parentheses at the end of the question number 2.
No, we're taking websites out, correct? Is that what I understood?
Yeah.
We were,
Did I miss one?
well, yeah, the.
Oh, at the top,
third
type
line
of material.
type Material.
Well, yes.
I just noticed we had websites scratched out everywhere else throughout the rest of them.
Yeah, and actually, the reason why I left a website there is because we do have websites that are blocked by our district mechanisms right now. Like, I don't know if National Geographic still is, but sometimes it is because it sometimes does contain images that are maybe inappropriate for some ages. So a teacher can actually use this. Oh, never mind, wrong form. Oh my gosh, going backwards. Nope, you're right. Website does need to come out of this one. Oh my gosh.
I get the whole website, because that can be
Yes.
changed, that's a moving target there
Yeah.
all the time.
So that was the last page.
Either one day and not the next.
Yeah, got it. Nope, so I'm. And then also on 8:15, you guys asked for question 10 or something like that. I tried to come up with some language, so you'll have to let me know if that was it. Are you willing to engage in constructive dialogue with staff to resolve this issue completely informally? Your complaint will not move forward without this dialogue. So I didn't know if that really needed to be a question or if it should be more of a statement.
I like it as a question because I think if somebody commits and says yes, then we have consent on both sides, but we don't participate.
See it either way, and letting them know that this, it ends right here, if you're gonna, if that's all you're gonna do is complain.
So when I rewatched the video, there were two kind of pieces. They're like, do we add a question or do we add something at the top of the form that just gives them a like. This will only move forward if you are willing to engage in constructive dialogue about this.
I mean, do we just put this at the top of the form?
Well, that was what one of the ideas was last time in your conversation, and then
Yeah, because I would hate somebody to get through this whole form and then.
they're like, no, oh, wait, yeah.
And I just think it sets the tone.
Do you want it as a question at the top of the form, or do you just want it as a little?
I mean, number 11 kind of asked you that question already. Not about willingness to engage in dialogue, but do you wish to provide testimony? And it's almost the same thing. I know it's kind of not, it's dialogue, it's more back and forth, like Elsie was suggesting. But it almost seems like it should be a subsection of that.
Well, again, if you really don't want it to move forward without them engaged, then take that, do you wish, I should say, you will be required to make an oral or written statement to the review committee. And that's the whole point of having that there, we'll take it out, take the question part out and tell them that's what they're required to do.
Cause goes back to before what I was saying, it's like, we're gonna choose some kind of bullet points off of what we were just talking about, right? And we're gonna try to get to the best point as possible, but this is a complex, ambiguous thing. And so I think having good guardrails to keep this constructive, it's kind of the yin and the yang of.
What if we did an option like, please provide your preferred form of testimony or something like that? Contact you, the supervisor, written, oral.
What I'm hearing for both sides is like a statement of goodwill or good faith at the top that says, we want to make this work for all sides. In order to do that best, we want to make sure that you are willing to engage in constructive feedback with the staff members, and that with your issues that you are willing to bring those to the review committee in some form or another. Your options to provide these to a committee are in person, written, those kinds of pieces, and not make them questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to you guys pushing back and feedback. My perspective is if a parent doesn't have to do any of the stuff that they just want to opt out, but if they're gonna ask the district to make a district-wide decision on a piece of curriculum, then we need to set a pretty strict parameter around engagement, because you're coming to how many kids district and asking for an enterprise level decision. And especially for offering them an out to not make it that.
I would think taking the question out and making it a requirement, my opinion.
You said it to top, or you either rank that.
So here's a question too for this. How often do you get a reconsideration request and the box they choose is do not use it with my student? Cause usually I would imagine. If you bring that complaint to your teacher, the teacher will just say, okay, I'll find something else.
Yeah.
So that almost really isn't. An option you really need, is it? Unless it's just,
So on number 9,
yeah,
okay,
because you have opt-out of material regardless of what it is, correct? You have
Yes.
that option.
Yep.
yep, that's policy.
And context wise, we've had, I think one of these in my, I think 7 years here, and I think we had one. The previous decade, so we've had about two issues go through this in about 10-15 years, so it's pretty rare.
Or do we put something that says withdraw it from use of all students? We then put something in there that, you know, if this is what you're choosing, then you need to be prepared
You
to
need to
do
follow
the
this all
rest
the
of
way
this.
through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's a good
I
point.
do like
I mean,
that.
how many times do you just mark it and just say, just don't use it with my student? I don't want my student reading this or
I doubt you
whatever.
even get to this form, yeah.
Right, exactly. So maybe if you decide to choose withdraw it from use of all students, well, if you're gonna do that, then you're gonna,
Here's a
Like you
request
said.
if you check this box.
yes,
See,
with that,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
well, see, my understanding of this form was to be used only when. Like, there's been a breakdown in. being
That's
able
step
to
3, yep.
Yeah.
In break 3, so,
So the teacher may not have listened.
well, or like somebody perceives like me just opting out of this is not enough, like. So,
It's that folder of a.
that it's only used when you want to bring this to, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So I think
that
it is,
question about individual student doesn't make. a lot
Yeah,
of
it doesn't make a
sense.
sense here. And I don't know that the third option, send it back to the selector or selectors for evaluation. I don't know that that makes a lot of sense in this context either. So I think if you're using this, it's because you don't want it used for any student.
This is why.
Yes,
this is fine.
so I definitely see where
Another shot.
I'm gonna take another shot at this one.
We'll bring it back.
You're doing great.
This is,
It's looking a lot better. I
Yeah.
like it a lot better this time.
no, I'm not taking any offense to any of it. It's a complicated one, and the more you look at it, the more you're like, why is question 9 not the first question? Or why does that have all those options to it? And
I guess my opinion of the day, if somebody wants to, if they're moved from district wide, follow that thing all the way through.
all the way through.
You
Yeah.
can't just go drop that piece of paper off and
Yeah.
walk off.
Yes,
There's, yes,
You're asking,
you can't just
you're changing the
drop it
direction.
and go, you have to be able to explain why and have that dialogue with whomever,
okay.
and
Yeah,
explain
the
your,
committee, right?
yeah, and explain your
Yeah.
side of why it is so.
Perfect.
And then all that.
That form cleaned up
I'm
and
happy about
bring
that.
back another draft.
Yep. Okay,
On that.
next ones don't have any changes. That's just the textbook evaluation. 12-15, the recommendation for adoption does not have any new changes. Neither does 13-15 or 14-15. 14-15, the reconsideration committee responses. Again, the last time we changed that, or when I brought it last time, I just reworded some things because it made it sound like it wasn't the reconsideration committees answering the questions. And then 15-15, the new ones.
Can you jump back to 13-15?
Yep. No, you're good.
Number 1.
Yep,
Just grammar for me.
please.
Please cross out to. Or to what in the material was objective.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
I actually did that says twice. Man, some things doesn't fit.
You're right.
Like these material, maybe. Just do it too.
Anything else on that?
And these are all part of AR.
These are all part of the AR.
That was the only part for me that.
Okay. And just to bring that back to context again, OSBA recommended creating 6 different ARs. One for each type of material. And I was trying to be like, let's not have 6 ARs, let's have 1 AR that kind of covers us for all the things. But there is just a lot in there. So when we bring this back and there's a lot of options for adjusting, updating and getting it a little bit better. So, and then 1515, the last one, the history of complaint. Again, I don't know if you've ever seen this one come through, Dr. Hoff. And so it was the taking out the website, including the magazine, just to make it so that it fit with all the other forms.
What is digital? Is that? Digital is, but what all does it fall under that category?
So I would say that when I'm thinking about digital curriculum, so I'm thinking about like iReady. So our kids get on iReady. It's not a workbook, it's not a book. They're doing instructional material that's all on a computer. They're maybe taking assessments or doing practice or fluency games that are all digital. So
That is downloaded one time and then work off of it, or they
yeah,
they log in and go access it somewhere?
they log in at school on a consistent basis.
I guess I'm just going back to the website thing,
Right.
because if they're logging into something that's somewhere else.
No,
That can be changed
Yeah.
at any given time versus something that we download and we have.
right.
This is a computer-based, closed computer-based program.
Yeah.
We own it, we have it.
Yeah,
Nobody can change it.
it's not changing without our knowledge.
No.
Yeah, that was
Or-
a good question.
That was what, yeah.
Like Accelerated Reader was a program we used for a long time. Kids would go on a computer after they had read a book, take some comprehension quizzes, but it belongs in our schools.
It's a closed system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I wouldn't even know how to change 1515 to make it better unless I had used it lots of times and had recognized that it didn't work for what we needed it for. But I have not seen it other than in this AR.
What,
It's a good thing.
what exactly would you use it for? I mean, because you have a complaint and then this is your history of the complaint, so like you would go back and look at old complaints, is that what this is for?
I would say that if a material comes up more than once, so somebody has said, we'll go back to our Hatchet experience, somebody can say, I think Hatchet is inappropriate for all kids in our district at this grade level, and the reconsideration committee has come back and said, nope, I actually think it's okay. And then somebody brought it up again, or another group brought it up, that same material up again for reconsideration, that then you would want to be like, well, maybe actually this needs to be looked at a little bit more. But I don't, because it says summary of informal resolution, so I guess the other way that I see this being used is that if somebody has come forward 4 times and wanted something out of our libraries or wanted something out of curriculum more than once, that we could be like, hey, we see you every couple of months about curriculum. Maybe there's a different path, or maybe we need to have a different conversation around what bigger concern you have. So those were the 2 ways that I was like, this form I think could be used in either of those ways. Dr. Hoff, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, like I said, I've only seen this go through twice in about 15 years, so. And then it hasn't come back, so yeah, this would just be in place if there was
a
a,
good problem.
yeah.
Yeah, I think most things get solved at that level 1 or level 2, that step 1 or step 3 or step 2. It doesn't make it to step 3 very frequently. Because we do recognize that parents do have the option of saying, this is not for my kid. And we've been very good, I would say, as teachers and staff about saying, perfect, we'll find something different. Either it's something that you are choosing or we have this other option available. Okay, so IIAR will come back specifically with some adjustments again to that reconsideration form. Yeah. Okay. I can do that. And then IIA will look at what the community school boards comes back with, and maybe if maybe if we don't hear from them in the next couple of weeks, I'll just take a go at it with what we have. That way it can either finish with my tenure here and then doesn't carry over if unless it really needs to. Yeah.
It was March 8th is when we got that email.
So it's
2 months from them, so.
yeah, so it's been a hot minute. So maybe I'll take a try at it with what the language that we currently have without their final revision, and then we can see.
And that might be linked to looking at another school district with similar values.
And I have, and trying to think, I looked at 4 different school districts, and it depends, because lots of school districts just follow the OSBA pieces. And there are some that don't, that write mostly all of their own policies or have, yeah, they follow along considerably, but most of them had kind of this language that you see in IIA is just in terms of like, hey, we need materials that make sure they are inclusive of everybody and don't have bias, I'll bring that word up, bias against or for a certain type of material or a certain author or a certain place where it comes from, and they define different materials like it is. So there weren't vast differences in in those policies, and I looked at some from Eastern Oregon and I looked at some from Western Oregon at small districts just to see what was different. And I didn't see the community school board language as specific as they got in those, but again, it's been a couple of months. And so if other districts are using community school boards, they are probably in the same process as we are right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. IKF. Don't believe we talked about IKF last time because we ran out of time. And we have talked about IKF at previous board meetings. There were a few things that Tammy and I caught just that were dramatic and had come from previous, not from last month, but from the previous month that we went back and added. So if we look at IKF, which is our graduation requirements, and we are now looking at the gray highlighted areas. We had a couple of months ago, some requests, I believe it was, Scott Cooper brought that back, like with our standard diploma. There was a desire to include US history back as a required course with our standard diploma. So the state of Oregon right now requires 3 social studies credits to graduate. IKF is really coming back because in the last year, the state of Oregon has asked for personal finance education to be a half credit, as well as that career readiness to be a half credit. Personal finance used to be allowed in the social studies credits, and it cannot now. It has to be pulled out and has to be an additional 0.5 credits outside of social studies. So that's kind of why IKF is back in front of you in terms of graduation requirements, along with a few other pieces of language. But with that conversation, then we started looking at the standard diploma and saying like, okay, we're just going to go with the language that says 3 social studies credits. They can include, and then they also must include that government credit. So the state of Oregon did say that you have to have a half a credit of government. It wasn't required before that, although Crook County students, 99.8% of them did not graduate high school without government. Now, 100% of students that graduate from our school district will have to have a half credit of government and 2.5 other credits of social studies. Scott talked about he would like to keep one of those credits to be US history, although that's not a state requirement. We can make that Crook County School District requirement. So that is why that is in gray. Coming back and kind of outlining again what credits should make up social studies for a Crook County graduate. The state says you have to have 1/2 credit of US civics or AP government, so that's that government requirement. We have added the language in here of 1 credit of world cultures and then 1 credit of US history would make up 2.5 of those. And then the other half credit at the high school is going to be a world geography course.
This is another one where we thought it makes sense. We want to guarantee to our community that kids graduating high school will have US history. So that's us kind of putting our Crook County stamp on. those requirements.
And again, it is the track that 99.8% of our kids.
And that piece right there was the last change to me.
Yes, I believe there is one other kind of grammatical one that we took out, but yes, so for the standard diploma and the honors diploma, you're gonna see the gray highlighted areas back in there, the gray with the blue, to go ahead and put those pieces back in there. But other than that, then I think it was, yeah, on page 8 of 10, there was just a little grammatical. I had typed in some notes in there and I had forgotten to delete them before I sent the policy to Tammy. So there's my own personal notes that needed to come out of there.
Scott, I don't believe it's gonna hurt anybody to know US history.
Yeah, that's, seems that's where we live. Good idea. Like this little Mark was mentioning, 99.8% of kids already have it. It's just nice that we can say that this is something we believe in, we want, and we want to call it out, especially.
I agree.
Carrie, does this read on the first page, at the end of the paragraph, the board will also establish minimum credit requirements for the wording of a. Okay, sorry, I just had.
No, you're fine.
to read it out.
There's a lot of color on this one, so.
But
I
I
know.
know to know that the gray is the most recent changes.
Yeah.
So thank you for making it an easy color.
Yeah, well, that is Tammy, because I had it,
Appreciated.
I had it in orange, so she, I know, so she was like, how about we just follow this pattern? And I was like, that is perfect, Tammy, thank you.
Okay. What's the more than
Can we do it?
IKF?
Right. I move to approve IKF as written.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to approve IKF as amended and written right here, all of its colors, and we have a second. Do we have further discussion? Okay, let's vote. Kelsey? Yes. Eve,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
and I as well. Yes, thank you.
Woohoo!
Oh.
That one felt good.
50%.
Gotta get one.
Like big fish.
Okay, here we are. Thank you, Miss Carrie,
Hey,
for everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
We'll keep working, we'll get the other one exactly.
Chip away at it.
Yep.
So the last one we have on our table, this was. Response on here. Is under 3.11 KLAR, and for this, we're bringing in Miss Melinda Thomas. Hello.
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Great, okay. So I'm bringing back the public complaint procedure form with revisions that the board discussed at the March meeting. And so I wanted to remind you all that I'm kind of serving as a scrivener here. I'm not providing my legal advice, except to say that all of the changes that we have been discussing and that you'll be looking at tonight are legally compliant with Oregon law. Which leaves it pretty wide open for us to do or craft a public complaint procedure that suits the district. And so with that reminder aside, I will direct your attention down to that step 1 heading where it says informal resolution. I think it was Kelsey last month that wanted some gatekeeping language to make sure that step 1 is implemented. I didn't add language. It'll be easy to do that, but I wanted to explain my thinking for not doing so. I think that that's a staff or administrator training issue, that they need to always start with step one. But I can envision a couple different scenarios where maybe we want to have a little bit of wiggle room. And it also says when practical, the complainant shall attempt to informally resolve their complaint. And so we can use the step two, the formal complaint as a gatekeeping procedure. But if you'd like me to add in some language for the next reading, I'm happy to do that.
So I had a question and just a thought, I'd love to run by the team, but so what I have seen so far is sometimes there's a complaint that gets raised to the board that has not gone through these steps. And I think it's problematic for two reasons. Number one, none of us are trained investigators. You all have gone through a lot of school to know how to manage an investigation. So none of it, as far as I know, none of us are trained for that. And then secondly, I don't have visibility as a board member to whether there's a breakdown at like a teacher level, administrator level, or superintendent level, as far as an ability for our community to address a complaint. And I think that's problematic for those two reasons. And so my concern is if those steps get skipped, and then it gets raised to kind of step 4, that I guess I would put it to you guys to talk about, like, whether it makes sense to have language in there to protect us, to go back to people to say, listen, this really needs to start at the appropriate level. Before the board is willing to get engaged in this.
That would be just a staff thing of making sure, you know, whatever gets it turned into.
Yeah, and I think that's, Melinda touched on that, and I think it's important, Kelsey, that you bring that up, because we have had complaints where they get up to step 3, which would be the, superintendent or designee.
Or the board.
Yeah, or the board, and you sit down and you realize that this again gets back to like putting our Kirk County stamp on it, is people need to initially sit down face to face, eye to eye, and say, hey, here's my problem. That when practical language allows for if there is some extenuating circumstance, an assault or something that, but I think we maybe took that when practical a little too easy and allowed people to skip that step in the past. That's one thing, and most recently that we've said, we want to, and I think that's the point Melinda's making, is making sure that our staff say, don't just say, oh, these people don't like each other, it's not practical, but say, no, unless there's some, outstanding circumstance, that your first step is to sit down with the person that you're, have a complaint against, and try to solve it at the lowest possible level. Like I said, looking someone in the eye and trying to get that solved. So whether that's adding language or whether that's me just working with staff to emphasize that point, I'm fine either way, but it is an important step that they follow all the process.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from a staff training level, but when us as a community, because we have accountability here too, don't even allow staff the opportunity to do that, that's not something that's trainable, right? And that's where the process gets really wonky to me, because and maybe there's a staff training level or issue or not, but if somebody comes straight to the board for issues where staff hasn't even had opportunity to resolve it, I think that's really problematic, and it puts me as a board member in a hard spot, because again, I'm not trained in investigation and it needs to go back to the staff, right? So I almost feel like there needs to be language in there to protect us. As well, to be able to say like, hey, like this really needs to go through these steps.
I think it goes back to just your instruction with Bill. If you're going to complain, you have to follow this out. You can't just go in there and drop that and
Walk out.
You're gonna have, there's steps you have to follow.
So maybe Melinda, that's something that that we can kind of take back, because we'll bring another draft of this, you know, we wanted to bring an improved, get the board's feedback, and then we know, Mr. Cooper also has some additional feedback on this, so we can maybe firm up the language, and try to capture that concept you're saying.
Just with clear expectations.
Yeah,
And
Linda,
maybe where we could put it would be in step, well, we don't call it step 4 anymore in this, but, you know, what do we call it? And I should preface this by, Joel's right, Scott and I have exchanged a number of communications where he has expressed some, he's not backtracking, that's not the right way to describe it, and I don't want to speak for Scott, but he is proposing some fairly comprehensive additions that I think you guys will have a much more fulsome conversation about at the May meeting, and he can kind of explain, and he and I, our correspondence has not been finalized, so I still have questions for him, and we're going back and forth. But maybe one thing that we could put, change the heading about complaints about superintendent or board members. Maybe it's complaints that proceed to the board level, and then we put there that a provision that the board can ask the superintendent to review the process that has come before to determine if it needs to go back to a certain step or something. So that might be an option, but I can add that language for the next.
Yeah, Linda, that's the flavor of what I'm going through, because I think as a community, we need to move forward in a productive way, and that requires all of us, you know, me as a parent or us as board and staff to be able to have not just a process, but actually follow it, right, too. And when we have clear rules of engagement, it protects all parties.
Yeah. I agree. And the draft that that I presented to you in March, and what this current draft with some revisions have limits. I mean, the whole point was to kind of limit what complaints came to the board under step 4 in the first place. And so this current iteration is under this, complaints would only come to you if they're about the superintendent or school board members. And so other than that, under this draft, you wouldn't see any other types of complaints anyway. But again, that's where Scott has some, he's been giving this a lot of deep thought, and he has some proposed changes on what comes to the board level. But for right now, under this draft, that also protects the board. But we can, I'll add in some language for the May meeting to kind of give the board, assuming you guys expand on complaints that come to the board beyond this draft, I can add some language into that section saying that you reserve the right to, you know, ask the superintendent to ensure that all previous steps in the procedure have been followed.
Linda, I've got 2 things I wanna ask about this one, because I think one of the reasons this step 1 gets skipped over a lot of the times is because we're not identifying stakeholders. So if you have a person that's complaining that has no skin in the game, they don't have a starting point at step 1. They're immediately skipping steps, going straight to the board.
Yeah.
So I think somewhere in step 1, we need to identify what their relationship with the complaint is and whether or not they need to be referred to that initial stage, such as a teacher. Like if you're a parent and that's your kid, have you talk to that teacher? And then also to protect those parents that may not know this process, I think we also need something in there that says that staff have to inform them of the further steps in this process, because that way the parents aren't feeling like they're being ignored, or they're not told the steps, because we don't have that explicitly in there. And then we don't get this bubbling up in the community because people feel like they're not being heard, or they maybe feel like they weren't told that they could go further.
So, one of I guess one response to that is the language under the informal resolution step 1. it says that they need to try to informally resolve their complaint with the district employee most directly involved in the matter resulting in the complaint. So I think that covers a lot of it, but maybe not all of it. And so I'll consider some language to kind of make it more explicit. The other way we could tackle this to make sure community members or people that have complaints know what the process is to post it, like a link to the complaint form and the AR somewhere in a more prominent place on the district's website, because it is hard when, we all know where policies and ARs live on the website. We know how to navigate it, but I agree with all the coding that OSBA uses and frankly around the country, it's pretty hard to find stuff if you're a parent needing to find policies. So those are two thoughts I have.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, though, what you're referring to is, say somebody in the community is complaining about something that their child was not involved with, and how do we identify
Doesn't
that?
directly involve them.
Yeah, how do we identify that the correct people are talking to the correct people, not just on the staff side, but the parent side?
Right,
Is that what you're getting?
yeah, yeah, somewhat, I mean,
Are you talking like a standing kind of issue? Like, does a community member have a standing to assert a complaint about something that doesn't really assert them?
Well, it doesn't concern their kid, I mean, something happened, it does not directly affect them. But it's their neighbor's kid.
Yeah. And we get that from time to time of, hey, I hear my nephew's getting bullied. I wanna file a complaint, where the complainant, the student's parents live here. The uncle's mad and lives in Wyoming and wants to file a complaint, where you have the kid's parents here, so that does happen from time to time, kind of this.
Proxy.
Yeah, not a direct guardian or the student, but yeah, a proxy.
and I guess I just want
Yeah.
that identification made, because.
Yeah.
I don't want to block these complaints from coming
Yeah.
in, those are legit, like if an uncle is complaining
Yeah.
from Wyoming.
Yeah.
Please do,
Yeah.
because maybe you're the only one speaking up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I would prefer is if that student is identified, someone has to reach out to the parent and say like, what's going
Yeah,
on?
and and then there's all sorts of like FERPA, student confidentiality issues in when a proxy is making a complaint. So maybe that's something, Melinda, we can just look at what kind of language is out there and kind of come up with some sort of proposal. Because I like the point you made where maybe this uncle is the only one advocating for this
Yeah.
kid, but we gotta make sure we're following all the processes.
And I know you have to keep the confidential and all that, but if there was a third party complainant, you can respond. If it was being handled, just say, hey, our informal resolution is. We've spoken with the parties
Yeah.
directly involved
Yeah.
and it's been resolved.
Yeah. Sounds
Yeah,
like.
and maybe another thought too is we can kind of put it, I don't know if we want to put it towards the end after the complaints to the board. But we could put in there that we can't talk to the complainant, we can acknowledge receipt of the complaint, but we can't even acknowledge if it has to do with a student. We can't give them a written response. We can't
Okay.
under any of the steps. And so I think, why don't we let Joel and I kind of think about this and figure out the best way to address a complainant who is serving as a proxy for a situation that doesn't directly concern them. Because it's obviously the complaints about their kid, a kid is different because we've got all sorts of FERPA confidentiality issues. We'll have some of that for complaints against employees as well. And that's a lot of what our complaints are, frankly, but I think we just need a chance to kind of ruminate on that a little bit.
On the informal resolution, is it worth, to me, it would be putting just a third party, because if you have the two sides sitting down together, you're gonna get a he said, she said. Putting a third party, you wanna have it, but somebody sitting in the room just to listen. And be the observer.
Like a mediator?
Not even a mediator, but just that third party
Not a
observer,
formal mediator, but someone as.
Somebody who can-
Yeah,
an informal mediator,
Yeah.
but
Right.
whoever that might be, because that way you can get, again, that third party, no, that's not what was said, because I was sitting there.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, think about all these complaints. We want them resolved at the lowest level. So if, if these people, as part of step one, were sitting down with someone that was like, hey, how do we come up with a solution? That's what we want, is for these to be solved and not climb up
And
these
maybe it was
steps.
just a huge miscommunication,
Yeah.
unless they actually start verbalizing and talking,
Yeah.
it'll be like, oh, now I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
completely understand that. How do we resolve this? And then,
I just think you need that third party.
that's, yeah,
Yeah,
Like
a
usually
neutral
you're-
third party to.
isn't there usually?
There's usually a principal or something.
Typically, you'd have if it was,
But it doesn't
teacher
say
and
it
parent.
Yeah.
Yeah, you typically would have the principal sit in or an assistant principal, but yeah, there's no language in there, so. Maybe
Okay.
that's another thing that Glenn and I can kind of chew on and come back with some options.
Yeah, we'll have to think through who that is most appropriate to be. I think it's a great idea. But built in the steps, we have the employee's immediate supervisor or the building principal, and it would be awkward to have an assistant principal kind of sit in to try and facilitate their boss's attempt to resolve. If it's just listening, it might be one thing, but we just want to be careful and mindful of that. So we'll come back to you with some ideas at the May meeting.
I was gonna say, I didn't wanna restrict it too much and like mandate that somebody had to be there. If the teacher and the parent can resolve it themselves,
Yeah,
just
Yeah,
the two of them.
Yeah, if they can do it, great, that's
Yeah.
fantastic, but I just,
yeah, we can.
just for, future step twos and threes,
Yeah.
to have that third party sitting there.
Step 1A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just add in saying, at the end that the district employee most directly involved may request a third person from the district to sit in to monitor the
What would you
attempt.
do? Their supervisor,
Yeah,
one level up.
yeah,
I think it's gonna have to be, I think we have to have some flexibility on who it is. It might have to be on a case-by-case basis, because the next level is to the employee's immediate supervisor or the building principal. And after that is the superintendent. Maybe it's the HR director. I don't know. Not all complaints have to do with HR, but maybe that's a natural place for it. I would like to keep some flexibility in who that person might be without identifying specifically the position.
I wouldn't want the staff member to be able to pick, just because, well, you just picked them because you're friends. with them.
Yeah.
They're gonna pick your side
We
immediately.
want someone that truly is
Have
a
to have
neutral
that
third party.
Third party
Yeah, yeah,
lens on it.
yeah,
And-
we can work with that and come up with something.
I mean, if they do that person, they just move on to step 2 then.
Yeah.
They
Right, I
just
mean,
put
that's
that aside.
yeah, possible, yeah.
Well, and I don't know, Joel, we'll have to talk about, do we have an overall supervisor for a complaint process, because, we've got our form, who does that come to? And it's, Jay has been he's been doing a spreadsheet of all the complaints that are coming in. And so I don't want to add to the job duties of an HR director or anybody else, but maybe there is somebody that can be kind of the
Yeah.
quarterback of the complaint process to make sure that all the steps are hit.
Rich Simons helped out with that, and prior to that, Jay would I like the term quarterback, just making sure the policy and processes are followed. Communicate with the complainant of like, hey, here's the next step, so, there's a role in there that we definitely can get figured out, but Rich did some of that as well.
Okay, so good thoughts. So moving on under step 2, I'm just reviewing some of the changes that reflect the March board meeting. We bumped up the deadline for the complainant to submit a written complaint to the supervisor or principal within 15 school days. And the school days, I think I discussed this in March, but the school days is important because if you get a complaint coming in on the first day of winter break or the first day of summer break, and we have calendar days, it's pretty hard to do anything with a complaint if you need to talk to people and do any kind of investigation if staff are gone and we cannot compel them to come back on non-contract days. And so that's why and 15 days bumps it up from 10 because I also bumped up the supervisor's response within to 30 days to make it more feasible. And then highlighted in yellow, as requested in March, the supervisor shall provide the complainant with reasonably frequent updates on the status of the complaint under this step, including whether the supervisor will require additional time to render a decision. Any questions on step 2 changes?
So, well, maybe I missed it, but what do you do if somebody files a complaint on the last day of school?
Well, we have 30 school days for the supervisor to provide a written or render a decision and provide a written response. And so that would basically toll the time period during non-contract days or during non-school days.
We typically, it's good to have that policy on your school. Like I said earlier, we want to solve these complaints. So we would try, if someone filed a complaint on the last school day, we would try to process it as soon as possible. That just allows some flexibility if a teacher is, hey, the next day I'm going to Puerto Vallarta and won't have cell phone service for 3 months, then we're not locked into having to kind of work through that. So, but yeah, typically we want to get these solved as soon as reasonably possible.
Anything else on step 2?
No.
All right, so moving on to step 3, which is the appeal to the superintendent. We bumped up the deadline or increased the time limit for the complainant to file an appeal of the step 2 decision and from 10 school days up to 15 school days. It just seemed fair since we're also expanding the district's timeline to respond. And again, I bumped up the bottom and the superintendent's deadline to respond to 30 school days. Again, knowing that some of these complaints need to be investigated, sometimes interviews of staff need to happen and staff cannot be compelled to come back in on non-contract days or non-school days. So the language in blue is language you guys already took a look at in March, with some changes from then highlighted in yellow. And so the superintendent may invite other interested persons instead of parties. That's a little bit broader. And then the last sentence says if such a process is offered, and this is the, alternative dispute resolution process, it will only proceed if, and there was a typo there, all parties to the complaint agree in writing to participate. So those changes were requested by the board last month. And then it goes on to this next paragraph is the actual facilitator or third-party mediator, what happens. And we had a sentence in there that said mediation sessions will be confidential. Mediation is confidential, but other types of dispute resolution formats aren't necessarily confidential. And so we added to the extent permitted by law. So that just follows, that allows confidentiality in the mediation process. But then it also says the parties shall have no expectation of confidentiality in any other dispute resolution process. Okay, so moving on, this was language I think Scott had suggested about whether or not we'll expect the mediator to issue or arrange a formal written agreement between the parties if it's successful. And so the language is just changed to say that the mediator or facilitator occupies a position of trust and confidentiality and therefore will work with the parties to determine whether any formal written agreement resolving the complaint is appropriate for the situation. Because there's some complaints that are probably just a formal written agreement is overkill. Any questions so far on those additions? They're pretty easy. got a typo in the next paragraph, so we took that or out in front of the third item in that paragraph. And then moving on to what was step 4. The heading was changed from step 4 to complaints about the superintendent or school board members. Again, that was designed to kind of stop so many complaints from coming up to the board level. This is the area where I think that Scott will have quite a bit of input next month for you, and I don't want to speak for him, but he had a lot of thoughts, so I don't want to, I'm still working with him to figure out how to resolve those. Everything's the same other than that last sentence in the first paragraph. That was crossed out because that was redundant to step 3, and that's where we're offering that mediation or other alternative dispute resolution process. We moved that up to the superintendent level instead of having that be at the board level. But we can always bump it back to the board if you want. It just means that you're going to have to hear every single complaint to make that decision, and that's what we're trying to insulate the board from. The crossed off language in red was already crossed off last time. Next paragraph, with highlighted yellow language. There was a request, I can't remember which board member mentioned it. I think it was probably Scott. That we wanted to build in some language that allowed the board to seek clarification from the complainant if it is unclear as to the exact nature of the allegations presented. I have revised the complaint form, and we'll get to that. But there's some language I added to that to help with this a bit. Let's see, next paragraph down. I added if the board, this is the paragraph that if the board is going to hear a complaint at this level, I added language that says the board shall keep the complainant reasonably updated during this period of time. And that could be by proxy too. The board could ask Joel to do that or ask Tammy to do that or whatnot, but that was a request of the board from the last month. Scrolling down further, there was a question about what happens if there's a complaint about that, as we had last month, or I guess earlier this month, about against both the board chair and the vice chair. So I added language that says that if a complaint is against both the board chair and the vice chair, the chair will appoint a pro tem chair to preside over the complaint. One thing I didn't consider until just now is that really only applies if the board chair or the vice chair has to recuse themselves. But I would imagine in most cases, the chair and vice chair would be recusing themselves if there's a complaint against them, although it's not required. It's their personal decision, but I've never seen the subject of a complaint that's sitting on a board not recuse themselves. Long story short on that one, I think this language is still good. I think it's a kind of a policy decision to say, regardless if they recuse themselves or not, they'll appoint somebody else to preside over the proceedings. All right, so scrolling down to the bottom of page 4, there's language that says the board will not hear complaints about policies, and we changed that per, I think, Scott's request to about adopted policies. So to the extent that you guys have already made a decision on a policy or other legislative decisions of the board, you won't hear that, and that may be subject to further discussion next month when Scott's back. It goes on to add language, community members concerned about policy or legislative decisions may utilize other methods of objecting, including but not limited to providing public comment at board meetings, directly contacting board members by telephone or email, or serving on a related board committee open to community members. And so that was per the request of one of you, I think, just to kind of spell out the other opportunities to provide input for those types of board actions. Any questions so far? And that's good because we don't have any more changes from the March meeting except to scroll, or for me, scroll down for you guys to flip to the complaint form at the very last page. And so I kind of reworked it. There's not a lot of changes. But the recipient of this complaint form could either be the district office or the name of the school, and I added or program because it could be, you know, I don't know, busing or something. So it's not necessarily specific to a school. And so it just kind of gives a little bit more flexibility for the complainant to identify what's at issue. I didn't really feel the need to add a date up here because down below there's a signature of the complainant and a date field there. So I just took that out. And then for the nature of the complaint, I think it was Scott that really wanted to drill down and make the complainants be a little more, or maybe it's Steve, I can't remember which one of you guys did this, be more specific about what the nature of their complaint is on this form, knowing that they can attach another sheet. So I added, for the nature of the complaint, please be very specific and identify what district policies or administrative regulations you believe are relevant to each allegation in your complaint. District policies and ARs can be found on the district's website under the school board tab. You may attach additional sheets as necessary, but this form must be filled out. And I see an apostrophe there after ARs that needs to be removed, which we'll do. And then Steve, to address your concerns about giving people options about what remedy they ask for, I just took that section out.
They're asking for the moon.
What?
They're always asking for the moon when it's not necessary. But
I want
yeah,
this employee fired, or yeah.
We have discipline remedies for that, so.
Yep. So that is, those are the changes from the last month's meeting. I think reflects everything that, at least that I captured. So you can sit with this and get some thoughts to it, and then I think the May meeting will be a bit more of a discussion for you, but I'm going to work with Scott to try and refine some of his thoughts because there's quite a few, and it would sort of change how we're looking at board complaints that come to the board, but I want him to explain his thoughts to you.
That makes sense. Well, yeah, that way you're not speaking for him and he can speak.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I have a quick update.
yes.
Amy and I were kind of watching how much we get through tonight. I believe we were seeing if we could cancel the May board policy work session. But what I'm thinking would be the most efficient is we keep that May policy work session. We get a second reading of all the policies that Jay went through. We can potentially adopt those. Carrie's gonna bring an absolutely stellar reconsideration request form. I believe we'll be able to adopt that and then finish up any discussion around IKF. And that would actually, at this point, clear our queue where we would need an additional June work session. And I know some of us are driving kids around swim meets and soccer games. So we'll stick with the May policy work session to kind of finish up the work we did tonight. And then look to have our policy queue cleared and then just get back to having policies at normal regular board meetings. So that would cut us down from 2 meetings a month to eventually this one. So
Feels like a lot of pressure.
you do it.
All on you, Carrie.
So with that, yeah, we'll keep that May meeting, but it looks like that might be our last policy work session.
Okay,
Awesome.
okay, yeah. Melinda, thank you for your time. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Melinda.
Have a good evening.
All right, with that being said, I think we're gonna adjourn this meeting at 7:20.